Hello and welcome to this fully comprehensive Adobe Premiere Pro editing course where I'm going to be teaching you how to become a great editor in Premiere Pro. Now, if you know me, you'll see that I'm a YouTuber, I've got 50,000 subscribers, and I've been editing in Premiere Pro for 5+ years. I've worked with brands like HP, Unidays, Skillshare, many brands on creating high quality videos, and ultimately, to be a YouTuber part-time, you have to have a very efficient editing process, so my process is also very efficient. Now, I'm known as a bit of a whiz kid when it comes to editing in Premiere Pro, and today I'm going to be taking you through exactly how to edit a video, because when you first open Premiere Pro, if you're transitioning from an old software to a new software, or you're on Premiere Pro for the first time with no prior video editing experience, it can seem incredibly complicated and daunting, especially the timeline. But I promise you, by the end of this class, you will have a full understanding of Adobe Premiere Pro. Today, I'm going to be taking you through everything from opening the software and adding your footage, to editing that for the very first time, adding motion graphics to make your video look very snazzy, color grading, sorting out the audio, exporting, and this finally leads me on to why you should watch my class, because there's thousands of classes on Premiere Pro. Now, I've got a track record of working with brands consistently because they like my high quality production value, which mostly comes from the edit. I've got a track record of being successful on YouTube, and I think that when you're starting out on Premiere Pro, you want to learn from somebody who's been in your position before. I've been in your position. And so I think by watching this course, you're making a very good investment of your next 2 hours. I've got my Premiere Pro shirt on. Let's jump into it. So welcome to class 1. Now, when you very first open Adobe Premiere Pro for the first time, you'll get this screen right here. And now to get started, you want to select new project and then just title the project, whatever you want to call it. Let's say Skillshare, I'll call it. And then you can obviously select the file and location you want to save the file in. So this is that when you edit or save your video, this is the location where the file will go to. So mine's going to Dylan, M1, Dylan, May 2021. Perfect. Then you select OK, and then it brings you up to this, and it can seem at first a bit like, what the heck is going on? So in this class 1, I'm going to teach you exactly what all of this is, and how to use all of this, and how not to get too scared by it, and how essentially understanding this right now is going to enable you to become such a better editor, more efficient editor, and by taking the time to watch this semi-boring class, you're going to save so much time in the future. So firstly, you've got the learning panel. Now, obviously, this is where they show you a few tutorials on how to get started, learning the basics, etc. But this is not really a useful panel because the tutorials are good, but they're a lot more complex than they need to be, I think, in my opinion. Then we move over to the assembly panel. So on the left here, you'll see that there's the project, the file you called it, Skillshare I called mine, and whatever you called your file will pop up next to the project bit. And this is basically where all of the files you drag and drop into this timeline go. So if you have music, the videos you add, they'll all end up here. And then you've obviously got media browser, which I don't really use, markers, don't really use. Same for audio clip, mixer, don't really use. And then libraries, again, not really relevant. The main thing I'd say the assembly panel is good for is seeing all of the different clips you've got in your timeline and in your project in one space. Coming down, the other noteworthy thing is that when we talk about creating adjustment layers later on, we're going to go new layer, adjustment layer, and this will enable you to create a color grade. And by clicking on this little page pill here, it brings up a secret menu that we'd like a lot. Now here, we've got the timeline. Now the timeline is the most important thing in the whole of Premiere Pro. You'll understand more about this in the next class when I actually add footage, but this is where you see all of the audio and videos you've got, and next to it you've got the main tool. So we've got the arrow tool, we've got the move everything along tool, we've got the ripple delete, where it basically brings everything, it clears dead space, razor tool, which enables us to split clips, then the pen tool is not really relevant, and then we've got the text tool, which enables us to type. And these other tools, I'd say the pen tool and this one, slip tool and hand tool, they're not really as important. We've also got noteworthy magnets that we'll talk about later on. Again, it's easier to see this via me putting a clip here, but just so you have a rough idea of what this is, because I'm sure you'll ask, they're very key stuff, that bar there, very key, but we're going to talk about it more in a second. Then we move over to the editing section. Again, we've got our timeline here. Our timeline is going to be on every panel at the top. So you've got editing, color, effects, audio, graphics, captions, libraries. Now, editing, once you've kind of got your clips on the timeline, you might decide to select a clip and add an effect to it. Once you click on the clip on the timeline, it brings up the clip on the source section. And then here you can see media browser, library info, then effects. and this is where you choose what effect to add to it. So we're going to talk about effects again later on. Again, a very useful panel. Color, this is where you're going to do your color grading. Lumetri color pops up at the top right there. You select the clip on the source again, then you can, add the color. Heading over to effects, again, we've got a dedicated effects panel. But you can see how with all these different panels at the top here, if we was making an edit of a clip, we can see we can access the effects panel down here on the editing section. So there might not be a need to go all the way over to the effects section. Once you get more advanced, you'll end up customizing your own workspace to make it the most efficient for you. We're going to talk about that later on. Here, the audio section, this is where, if you wanted to, you customize your audio. Now, this could be to make it louder, quieter, adjust stuff. Again, it's a panel that I don't really use. 5 years of editing, don't really need it. We've then got the graphics panel at the top. And the graphics panel is one that I use all the time. This is where you'll find some default graphics from Adobe Premiere Pro. You can drag and drop them onto the timeline and they pop up in your video. Again, same sort of thing where the timeline stays at the bottom. The little tools have moved up to the top here, and then you can see what source and what clip selected at the top, with adding effects again still possible down here. So you can see there's a lot of overlap in the different panels. Realistically, what I'd say is that when you're first starting out, when you're first going to edit your very first video, don't worry about many of them. Stay on the editing panel. There's also 2 workspaces at the end here, but they're my personal workspaces that are kind of irrelevant, but I'm going to show you how to create custom ones later on. But essentially, as soon as you open Adobe Premiere Pro, my recommendation to you is that you open up the editing panel. And from this editing panel, we are going to move forward and we're going to look at adding clips to the timeline, subsequently editing those clips and so on. Now, there is so much to be getting on with on this layout initially. I wouldn't worry about it. You're going to learn so much through trial and error right now, so let's get on with it. And so welcome to class 2. Now in this class, we are going to be looking at adding footage to the timeline and explaining the timeline, a very key concept for editing the whole video, for the whole of your future editing career. This is probably going to be one of the most important classes, and the timeline is a concept that once you master, you can do so many things with editing. So firstly, we're going to drag and drop a clip onto the Adobe Premiere Pro timeline, and let's go ahead and do that right now. So once you're on the editing panel, like I suggested you be on at the end of last class, you simply want to find the file that you want to put onto the timeline. So this is going to be all of the clips you've got for your video. Maybe it'll be one clip, maybe several clips. You simply open up your Finder. Then if you have multiple clips, you would drag and drop them in the order they are filmed, as so, and then drop them. However, today we're just going to be working with one clip, so I can really explain in detail the basics. So I'm going to drag and drop this one studio film clip where I talk about making a video from the University of Sheffield. So I'm going to drag and drop this clip onto my timeline, which is down here. It says drag and drop media here to create sequence. It's going to import the files, and then once it's imported, we can see we are going to end up with a different layout on the screen. So the layout we now have is that we've got this kind of 2-sided thing on the timeline. Now I'm just going to drag and drop this arrow right here to make the timeline a bit bigger just for now, because the bigger this is, it's easier to see sometimes. So right here we can see we've got this P, whatever the name of the file. Below that we've got some audio bumps. So basically the top half of this timeline separated by this line here is for visual stuff like images, for motion graphics, for the actual video, and then the bottom is for audio, music, bubble pops, sound effects, and so on. So we can zoom in and out on the trackpad, and we can drag this cursor here to see the whole video, and then obviously when it ends and it goes back to just being a blank timeline. So that is what we've done. We've now got the clip into the actual process of we're starting the process of editing. And we can see that now, whenever I click on this clip, on the editing panel, it comes up with effect controls. So this is again, something we're going to talk about later on, great for zooming in and out of clips, many other things. And then if we revisit some of the panels, we'll see that we've now got a different source. So we can see that our source in the assembly section has got the file P100, which is the one I just drag and dropped. So that's what I was talking about earlier on. We can see